Gopi Jana Bala Bhagiri Varadari Pijana Bala Pijana Bala Bhagiri Varadari Pijana Bala Suranandana Brajajanaranjana Yamuna Tiravachari Yamuna Tiravachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Madhava Punjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Gopi Jana Bala Bhagiri Varadari Gopi Jana Bala Bhagiri Varadari Jatsodana Brajajanaranjana Yasodana Brajajanaranjana Yamuna Tiravachari Yamuna Tiravachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Madhava Punjabi Jayam Paramahamsa Parivekacharya Astat Saraswati Modest Divine Grace is the Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki Gaura Premanandi. Canto 11, Chapter 7, Text 4. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhirayat. So, text 4. Yaryevayam maya yukchakto Lokayam nashtamangalam Bhavishyatya chirat sadho kalinapi nara krita yaryevayam maya yakto lokoyam nashtamangalaha Bhavishyati yachirat sadho kapil kalinapi nirakrita. O saintly Uddhava, in the near future I will abandon this earth. Then, being overwhelmed by the age of Kali, the earth will be bereft of all piety. And getting worse as we go forward in time. Report. Lord Krishna's plan was to bring Uddhava back to his own eternal abode after a brief delay. Because of Uddhava's extraordinary spiritual qualities, the Lord wanted to engage him in propagating his message among other saintly persons who were not yet advanced to the stage of pure devotional service. However, the Lord assured Uddhava that he would not be bereft of the Lord's association for even a moment. Also, because Uddhava had become a perfect master of his senses, he would never be afflicted by the three modes of material nature in this way. Before bringing Uddhava back home, back to Godhead, the Lord empowered him to carry out a specific confidential mission. Paragraph. Wherever the supreme position of the personality of Godhead is not recognized, useless mental speculation becomes very prominent, and the safe and sure path of hearing perfect Vedic knowledge becomes covered by the chaos of mental concoction. At the present time, especially in Western countries, literally millions of books are being published on hundreds and thousands of subjects. Yet, despite this proliferation of mental concoction, people remain totally in ignorance about the most fundamental issues of human life, namely, who am I? Where have I come from? Where am I going? What is my soul? What is God? Paragraph. The personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is the reservoir of innumerable enchanting pastimes, and thus he is the source of innumerable varieties of pleasure. In fact, he is the ocean of eternal pleasure. When the eternal soul is bereft of the constitutional pleasure that comes from loving service to the Lord, he is overwhelmed and bewildered by material nature. He helplessly chases after material sense gratification, thinking that one material object is good and another is bad, and constantly changes his assessment of what is good and what is bad. Thus, he derives no peace or pleasure, in a constant anxiety, is in constant anxiety, and is repeatedly thrashed by the cruel laws of nature in the form of birth, death, old age, and disease. Paragraph. In this way, the conditioned soul becomes a fit candidate to take birth in Kali Yuga, which is the epitome of misfortune. In Kali Yuga, the living entities, who are already suffering so many tribulations, mercilessly turn against one another. Human society in Kali Yuga becomes savagely violent And men open slaughterhouses to butcher hundreds of millions of innocent creatures. Large-scale wars are declared, and millions of human beings, even women and children, are quickly annihilated. Paragraph. Unless the living entity recognizes the authority of the personality of Godhead, he remains a helpless victim in the clutches of Maya, or material illusion. He concocts different solutions to release himself from Maya, but these solutions are themselves creations of Maya, and thus cannot possibly release the conditioned soul. In fact, they only intensify his distress. In the next verse, Lord Krishna specifically warns Uddhava to avoid Kali Yuga and go back home, back to Godhead. Those of us who have already taken birth in Kali Yuga should also heed this advice and immediately take all necessary steps to go back to the Lord's eternal abode for a blissful life of perfect knowledge. The material world is never a happy place, especially during the fearful days of Kali Yuga. Pretty bleak picture, huh? But honest. The heart of our founder Acharya, the compiler of Srimad Bhagavatam and the previous purports, now Gopi Pranadana and Hridayananda Goswami, principal, and others probably also combined to make these purports, the BBT purports following where Prabhupada ended. Pretty graphic and truthful. So those who took this responsibility to continue their loyalty to Prabhupada was, of course, their own language is not Prabhupada's language, but the spirit of what they're writing is consistent with, besides their skill in Sanskrit, their fidelity to what Prabhupada was teaching, the mood and the mission of our founder Acharya. And thus, the emphasis again and again on the importance of taking full shelter. This morning I did a little research and my computer wasn't completely cooperating. But a question came up yesterday. These 24 gurus, which is our topic for the next few classes, is that Dattatreya? So a little research so far. I'll see if I'll get something later in the course of the day. So far, online, it's a one-to-one correlation. From our acharyas, there's no mention of it one way or the other. To be continued. So is it or is it not? It's not so essential. It's interesting, but it's not so essential. And by this evening, I should have a response from two followers of Sri Sampradaya, or at least knowledgeable persons in Sri Sampradaya. What was the background? What's the backstory, the foundation for this split between the two groups of Sri Vaishnavas? And, if it can happen even amongst Sri Vaishnavas who are so traditional, then, that this, it can happen anywhere in one sense. Because, you know, ISKCON needs to continue going forward in future generations, and some ideas may evolve that are not in keeping with our founder Acharya. Therefore, how important it is to understand our founder Acharya and the predecessor Acharyas and what their views are. So we can just throw our hands up in the air, leave it to scholars, or we can do our own homework and to our capacity, try to understand. This purport here gives a clear idea. That the foggy or fair to partly cloudy idea of God doesn't, it can lead in so many directions. And probably in course of time, as it has, it will. And so, seated here in the room, as well as wherever else, the current audience that's hearing the message of Srimad Bhagavatam, how carefully that hearing and question, answer procedures to get further clarification, so that, and then the propagation. It's very simple. The process is receive and give. Prabhupada's emphasis, this is now in relation to yesterday's event and abundance of comments about what Prabhupada said about Pandava Nirjala Ekadasi and Ekadasis, and there's, so in short, there's details, but there are rules, and the rules are to be followed. And for one who's engaged in missionary work, the preaching work, those rules are not binding as they are binding to those that are not engaged in preaching. Emphasis on preaching. Emphasis on, so the Ekadasi principle, both the Nirjal and the fasting topic came up in Prabhupada's direct association. Someone was quoting Prabhupada, in Prabhupada's presence was quoting, "You said this." And Prabhupada said, "No, never said." And that established. So preaching is the essence. And so many ideas are out there. It's not going to stop. So how do you get the right idea amongst so many ideas? Therefore, the distribution of books and the reading of the books and understanding of books and repeating books and living what it is becomes important, for the perpetuation of the disciplic succession. Because without giving, for example, this and that, it's already, there's already changes. So we have to know what's what to say no to the changes, instead of saying, "Oh, that's interesting. Maybe that's right. That's not what I heard it somewhere. That's not right." But we need to know for our own protection, and the disciplic succession's protection, and staying. So finally, so much depends upon leaders, and leaders are empowered by Krishna to do something, to lead or mislead, and take the misleader to get followers to follow their misleading. There are misleaders, and they're followers of misleaders. So I'm just commenting, on something that's a sensitive point for me, and that is the continuation of specific obsession in the next however many years, 50 years, 100 years. Is it going to be the same? And if it's going to be the same, what needs to happen so that it's going to remain the same and not become something else? Our founder, so one more time, our founder, Acharya, gave such clear, strong emphasis. You know, Gauratai and Nityananda was entrusted with the mission to propagate. So Gauratai worship and the mode of Nityananda, propagation, preaching. And what preaching what? Well, message of disciplic succession. Well, what's that? And someone may emphasize this and someone may emphasize that and say, this is our teaching. And someone says, that's our teaching. And then people get confused. Some persons get confused. I'm going off in this little direction because I sense it's important that there's a proper understanding of what's what. The indication that the 24 gurus topic is important, but it's not the traditional topic. That is, guru means a person. And here he has 24. It's not guru, it's not gurun, it's material nature. And then, the conclusion, it's his body. It teaches him and teaches him to the point where he is detached and fixed in transcendental knowledge, and thus experiencing a transcendental joy like a madman, like an avadhuta. Not just because he's mad, but because he's such a fixed up transcendentalist. So that's not convention. Convention is someone who you hear from. He doesn't hear from the five gross material elements, or from the pigeon, or from a tree. It's not conventional, but it's transcendental. Being given by Krishna to Uddhava, and a very, very important, it's like, the initial part of Uddhava Gita, which is very important, just like Bhagavad Gita, it's very important. How to get it right. Because the Avadhuta Brahmana was so elevated, as we have been discussing and heard, he sees Krishna everywhere. He sees super soul everywhere. He sees what is behind the features of material creation, behind Prakriti. He sees the controller of Prakriti, source. And then through this Prakriti, that Prakriti, there's lessons to learn about how to conduct your life. This virtue, that virtue, and follow virtue. But virtue alone is not transcendental. But seeing the Supreme Lord behind virtue, that's transcendental. And again, this the emphasis, because I just was absorbed in it so much yesterday, the position of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sending sending Nityananda and Haridas Thakur here and there, and missionary work. How important he considered it, because it's Kali Yuga, and misconceptions are abundant, and laziness is also abundant, and Dharma projita kaitavotra paramo nirvatsaranam stam. Cheating, Prabhupada so often said, cheating religion. What's a cheating religion? Well, it poses itself as, but it's not. And what is? That which is given by the personality of Godhead. So that certainly, that's Bhagavad Gita. No doubt about it. Greatest authority is speaking. Here I am. Here's how to reach me. Then this section is a little on the unconventional side. Not just a Krishna speaking, that's conventional, but speaking of gurus who are multiple persons, multiple entities, not even persons, that are the source of the inspiration and the happiness, the joy, the detachment, behaving like a child, as Yadu said to the an Avaduta Brahmana. Please explain. Where does your joy come from? So the unconventional. Unconventional is fine, provided who is the authority speaking it is clear, and what is the intention of the authority speaking it. That thread must be picked up. Therefore, it's just like saying the Bhagavad Gita is the undergraduate, Bhagavatam is the graduate, but the graduate doesn't say something different from what undergraduate. It's further understanding of what's undergraduate, and the undergraduate can't be negated. Dismissed. Doesn't mean that. It means this. Proper understanding of Bhagavad Gita is essential. Proper understanding of fundamentals is essential. And then the proper guidance. In his public lectures, Prabhupada would often speak about so many, different times. It was so many volumes, and then another so many volumes, and then the rate at which, because he was very on top of it, how many books were being distributed or how many dollars came in from those books that were distributed daily. So he was getting these reports, not like an entrepreneur, but like one who's concerned with the mission, that people should hear that which is genuine, and therefore so much focus on book publication, book production, and increasing. Because there's a fire. The fire has to be, this is the preaching mood and mission. Put out the fire, it's a forest fire. Mahadav Nirvapana. Put out the forest fire. And transcendental knowledge has that capacity. It has the capacity or potency to awaken dormant love for Krishna. And as that dormant love for Krishna awakens, the darkness of covering and illusion can be dissipated and nullified. Light dispels darkness. Go back to the purport here. Those of us who have already taken birth in Kali Yuga should also heed this advice and immediately take all the necessary steps to go back to the Lord's eternal abode for a blissful life of perfect knowledge. Hearing this may sound like an appeal for liberation. And that would be it wouldn't be a surprise that people would say that's the appeal. But it can't be. The platform of eligibility for going back home, back to Godhead is not moksha. But entering into the stage of pure love for Krishna. And then it's not just a change of address, it's a change of consciousness. And then such a person can be anywhere. And they're back home, back to Godhead. If Krishna so desires, whatever Krishna so desires. And being in the intimate association with Krishna is the meditation of such a person. That's back home, back to Godhead, regardless of their address, of birth after birth or whatever. That's the teaching of pure devotion. The material world is never a happy place, especially during fearful days of Kali Yuga. Again, searching for happiness in a place where there's no happiness, searching for water in a desert. So these 24 gurus are in different ways, in different features in each of them, helping the Avadhuta Brahman to understand where the place of real shelter is and the qualities by which one should live one's life conducive to that place of shelter, right? As in opposition to being taken away from the place of shelter, as material life will do. We'll hear more as we go forward with what he learns, and his Avadhuta Brahmana summary at the end. Nice 6. Let's see if there's some discussion. Yeah.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj, for such a thoughtful discussion. So it might be a little long question, so just bear with me, please. So regarding the question is on the preaching aspect that you mentioned about, which I totally understand and believe it's very important to kind of phrase the question in a sequential manner. There are sort of two schools of thought that I have understood. One is, don't need to preach. The message itself is pure and powerful, and it'll reach the people. The other is, we must go out and preach. So I am not asking about this at all. I am firmly of the belief and understanding in Chaitanya Charitamrita itself, Lord Chaitanya has said
Yeah.
about preaching. So there is absolutely no doubt in my mind about the second one, that's what our instruction from Bhagwan itself is. However, in the second one, where we must go out and, or devotees of Bhagwan must go out and preach, that's a very important instruction. There are again two schools of thought that, and which I have seen very much prevalent till right now, is to understand the message and preach versus to understand and apply it for a long, again, time may not be a factor because we don't know how many lifetimes of understanding and application one has, but maturity and then preaching. It's a very fine line between the two, or maybe an unknown line, but still we see that. So there are these two, mature yourself and then preach versus, you have understood the message and preach, which can happen when people are smart, people are intelligent, engineers, doctors, so on. Very easy to, not easy, but one can understanding of the message occurs much faster, I believe, in even in my case, but application takes time and realizations take time. And then within this second one, again, there are two schools of thought that go ahead and preach, don't wait. And by that you yourself will develop qualities, you yourself will understand the message, but don't wait, go ahead and preach anyway. But there, I feel that there are two understandings, that there, it's okay if people get 70% of the right message, even if there is some inconsistency or something wrong, people are at least getting that. But within that, maybe some very subtle but important inconsistencies that are getting conveyed, versus really understanding the message, applying, realizing, and only then going out and speaking to others and affecting their lives, versus, okay, you just give it out, the basic messages, you can't go wrong. And if there are some, kinks, they'll get ironed out along the way, but maybe some kinks are very permanent, very consequential, which is where it seems like the other path is more important. So, and some are, could be really important aspects. I mean, recently there was somebody I just observed, just as an example, someone saying the purpose of all Shastric injunctions is to develop good qualities. And I asked for a reference.
It's a byproduct, not a purpose.
Yeah. And anyway, so forget the example, but just this is the thought that comes to mind and has been there in my mind for a long time. And I have, just your thoughts on this whole topic. I hope I conveyed
I got the question.
The various branches.
Well, I like things that are simple, and life can be not simple, but our founder Acharya engaged youngsters that he knew were not at a matured stage of realization and in character and quality. He engaged them in the purifying process of distributing. Now, one of the major points of emphasis, was his books, because it doesn't miss the target. And the representative of the book may not be all of what the book says, all of what they don't embody or carry with them the qualities of what the book says. So but I distill it down to something simple. under proper guidance, preach. And under proper guidance includes someone who is significantly superior or significantly advanced in the realization and internalization of those teachings, kind of a person. You know, it's not a necessity that our founder Acharya is guiding me or you or anybody in a moment-to-moment basis, as did happen in some cases during Prabhupada's time. And during Prabhupada's time, some of those persons did fantastic, and some of the persons fell away or deviated or something. So, you know, that's your 70% example. Given the conflagration of a forest fire, you throw water. Or you do that which will effectively diminish the impact of the forest fire of material existence. Built within that system, that the preaching, although I'm not a fully realized model of what the preaching, the teaching says, I'm a forest fire fighter. And, you know, I can say from, you know, firsthand experience, that was our mood. I mean, we were rough and tumble youngsters going here and there in Prabhupada's mission. So there are some persons that deviated because of their own ambition or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But no loss, because the emphasis, in one sense, no loss, because the emphasis was Prabhupada's books. That was the light that brought light into the darkness of the age of Kali, and the chanting of the holy name, you know, emphasis on that also. So now, to distill that long response to your long question, preaching is the essence. Purity is the force. Preaching is the essence. And preaching with a purposeful submission unto the one who's giving the order to go and preach, then comes purity. Within that process, there's the purifying process that purifies the preacher that's not yet pure. And then the message, because they're not exemplifying the teachings purely, they're going to represent the teachings less than purely, but the teachings are there in the books. Therefore, you know, the importance of book distribution, the importance of the author, the qualified author, and the distribution of that message of that qualified author. You know, the founder Acharya's message and his representing distribution. That's the tip of the spear, along with the holy name, and then we go to work. However motley we are as a crew, with the faith and the in principle understanding, by this I will become purified, and by this others will be benefited also.
So you're saying that process of, if one believes the process of preaching or the act of preaching will make me pure, versus a subtle, it definitely can.
Yeah.
But versus there's a subtle line between some effortful intent and application on one's own part to apply.
Yeah, that's sincerity.
Exactly. To develop purity.
That's Bhakti Sandarbha.
Exactly. Versus just saying, okay, I'm doing this and therefore I'm getting purified, but I can.
Yeah, then some people do the flim-flams thing. I'm doing, but I'm not really doing because my heart's not there.
Yeah.
But I want the credential of I'm doing.
Yeah.
So then that's not going to be very effective. But it's better. It's something, and then that somebody that's doing that something needs to have somebody tap them on the shoulder or bang them on the head or correct them.
Right. I really liked what you said about under proper guidance, do it, and somebody to be there to be bang them, and somebody to be willing to accept being banged upon. Otherwise, one bang and then the relationship is over forever. I'm never going to look at you, and
Yeah. There are people that are like that. There are
it's
people
not
like
helpful.
banging also. They're abusive people.
Yeah.
That's not purification. Abuse, it's not. But reach nonetheless. And the effect of same, is this concern that I have. What's the Hare Krishna movement going to be 50 years from now? And your question, a proper response to your question is going to define what it's going to be. History has a way of repeating itself, and history says when there's a great acharya, light goes into the world. And then there may be a period of time where there isn't a great acharya. And then darkness starts, other things, weeds start to creep in. And then comes the great acharya again, like Krishna's kindness. And in between, it's messy. It's not as prominent, it's not as pure, it's not as effective. And therefore, the importance of books. I mean, I really liked the seminar that Radhika Raman gave at ISV on churning the topics of Shastra. That was the topic that he was asked to speak about. And one of the things that he expressed was, although these prominent acharyas that were prominent acharyas, there's gaps of time between them. And one would know what the predecessor acharya was saying, not just like literal parrot repeating. They understood what they were saying, and then they said in their own way. And his way of expressing was, it's like they're having dialogue with each other over many generations. They didn't have physical presence, but they're having dialogue with them. And we have the opportunity to eavesdrop on their dialogue. That was how he was expressing it. He said it several times. So they're luminaries, and they're the ones. And then we're the followers. And how faithful are we as followers? That's the sincerity question. And sincerity, the opposite of sincerity is pride. It spoils everything. In different degrees of pride, different varieties. Therefore, humility and sincerity, and those. So back to this person who's arguing, who said there are persons arguing. Qualities are everything. But yes, qualities will come to those who are properly situated. Those that are not properly situated, they're going to have a semblance of those qualities, but not real qualities. So, more on this topic? You're good.
No. Thank you for the nice discussion. Though I have another.
Yeah, you go
change gears a little bit. So on the other completely different thing, just wanted to share my thoughts and request your embellishments and thoughts and expansion on it. this topic of like that you mentioned, Bhagavad Gita is the undergraduate and Srimad Bhagavatam is the postgraduate.
Graduate.
Or graduate, yeah. Chaitanya Charitamrita being the postgraduate. The way I look at it is when Srila Prabhupada said that, so there are statements that acharyas make like this one, and there is something to sort of say a statement, but the meaning is to emphasize the other point, the opposite point, but people sometimes take the previous point as the main one. As an example, like the power of the holy name, by just chanting once, there are so many verses. One in unlimited sins are removed, one goes to Vaikuntha, and so on. But at the end of Canto 6, Chapter 2, the last line is, what to speak of if somebody takes the name with Shraddha, with sincerity. So the message there, as I understand, is to show the power of the holy name, that how powerful it is, and therefore we should take it all the time.
Yeah.
The message is not that,
yes, that's
oh,
right.
just take it once and you're done.
Of course.
Similarly, I think when Prabhupada said this, it was to show the huge significance and importance of Srimad Bhagavatam, rather than to minimize or in some way shadow or cloud the significance of the Bhagavad Gita. But sometimes I feel it's taken, oh, it's in Bhagavad Gita, never mind. What about this statement in Bhagavatam? And people are smart to find, Bhagavatam overrides, that's postgrad or graduate, this is undergraduate. The purpose is not to minimize the Gita. The purpose is to show how supremely important the Srimad Bhagavatam is. Never mind that it was compared to the Bhagavad Gita as a probably a, like that.
Yeah, I'll say the same thing in other language. Even when speaking on very high points from the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada would refer in the same lecture or the same presentation again, and this is in Bhagavad Gita. So he was emphasizing and seeing very clearly the thread that connects the two. Even there may be some embellishment or some emphasis that looks like it's not the same. It's the same. The foundation is both. So, and he would add, and this is the supreme authority. There isn't a greater authority, and who accepted him as the greatest authority? This acharya, that acharya. So he's the greatest authority. And this is his statement. This is how to understand his statement. Now back to the message of Bhagavatam. So that's the foundation. And understand the Bhagavatam based upon the foundation. Understand what you learned in graduate school based upon what you learned in undergraduate school. There's no, if one sees a contradiction or conflict, then you better get your eyeglasses out again. Because there isn't. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Shall I go ahead?
Yeah, you got the microphone. Go.
Hi, Krishna Maharaj. Today we discussed one point that when there is a non-traditional approach or a method that was mentioned, we should look at who is the speaker and what's their intent.
Look at who is the speaker?
And what's their intent.
And then what?
What is their intent?
What is the intent?
In that line, I have a question. Like, what should be the point that I should keep in my mind while we continue discussing about the 24 gurus in the next 2 days?
What is it? Number one thing you should keep in mind? That's your question. Compassion. Krishna had a plan. He confirmed, yes, that's my plan. You're asking, take me with you. I have a different plan. My plan is Vipralambha for a while. You go give my association to Narayan Rishi and their associates, because that's one place I didn't go. I went here, I went there, I went there, went there. Great souls. Didn't go there. You're my emissary. And in this way, I'll be with you. Because his as was stated, this is now Vishwanath, his Yogamaya potency, he can be with him without those instructions, but it's a medium through which he, Uddhava, already elevated in Jnana and Vairagya, can feel presence of Krishna. In the mode of separation, that's what happens when he meets Vidura. He goes in samadhi and has to struggle to come back out of samadhi to answer Vidura's questions. So he's with Krishna. Vidura is with Krishna. Excuse me. Uddhava is with Krishna because that's his bhakti. And then, and there's some means by which Krishna is ensuring that I'll be with you. You'll feel my presence. So, compassion. And the various ways by which we can learn from Krishna's teaching to Uddhava how to feel Krishna's presence, to understand lessons by which we should live. That it's not just, the mountains this and the river that and the tree this. It's what's behind that. But the compassion of Krishna to his devotee, in this case it's Uddhava, then it's us. Because Bhagavatam is for us too. So compassion. And how Krishna is merciful. My little phrase, in communications and letters and stuff, Krishna is very kind. Let me count the ways. Yeah. You have something.
Thank you, Maharaj, for very.
What's going on?
Yes.
Just turn the angle a little bit. Yes.
Yes, I also. Shall I
Try it
move?
again. Go ahead.
I also appreciated your statement about.
Maybe you should do without the microphone. Go ahead. Authority. Yeah, okay. Hmm. 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 Mm-hmm. What you're speaking is reminding me of Prabhupada's departure. I remember very clearly. I was the temple president of the 55th Street Temple, and I was sitting in the temple room, and the message came. And I was supposed to convey the message to the devotees in the temple room. So we had everybody assembled. I just started crying, couldn't speak. They understood what was going on without my saying it. Then we tried to have parents. I tried to have, but and so many years later, it's not a different message. The mood isn't as intense as it was at that moment, but the feelings of separation and continuing as I was doing before, as a young brahmachari now. So this is also a response to your question. It's just personal, subjective experience of the same. But that feeling of separation and the sense of intense absorption in the person who we are feeling separation from, it can it can take different flavors, like the sharing from yesterday, back to back to back glorification of great personalities, Baladev Vidyavasan, and and Gangamata Goswamini is very purifying. And where did that come from? Well, wouldn't know anything about anything. So it enhances the root. It's watering the root, and then there's the awakening of Krishna consciousness comes through that. Not purified, becoming purified by the process of propagation, taking, receiving, and giving. At whatever stage one is in, the spiritual trajectory, receiving and giving. Okay. You have something online. Let's hear it.
Lord Krishna himself is saying that Kali Yuga is overwhelming and instructing Uddhava to preach. Yet it's hard and difficult to hold on to the teachings of or to this process. What is our shelter during this process of awakening?
You just, with faith, you continue. Recognize, like someone throws you a lifeline and you're drowning in the ocean. It's not easy to be drowning in the ocean. Man, grab that lifeline and keep hold of it. Yeah, but grab that lifeline, kind of mood, because that's the place of shelter. And you can say, "Oh, it's difficult." Okay, it's difficult. I acknowledge it. Grab that lifeline. For us and for others that may see us grab the lifeline, they can also grab the same lifeline. Share that same lifeline with others. That's our the why and what to do. I think we're done. Are we done? She the Prabhupada. He done.